Now, the final part of the construction of your board before we get onto shaping is the addition of a nose or tail block, which can be entirely decorative, but it can also be used to hide the gaps in our rails around the nose and the tail where we couldn't get the rails to bend all the way around. Now here on our 7-tube egg, we left our rails open around the tail because this radius was going to be really difficult to get the solid Polonia rails to wrap all the way around. So instead we left them open, and then we can hide the gap with this solid block after the fact. Now the material that you use for your nose and tail blocks is entirely up to you, and you can get a bit creative here. You could use something that's a bit exotic or unique as far as timber goes, but you could also just use the Polonia offcuts from your deck skins. My favorite look is to create this big looking plywood from using the offcuts and stacking the layers so that the grain direction's altering between every second layer. This gives a really effective look and looks great once the finish hits it and those end grain layers get nice and dark while the long grain ones remain kind of the same color as the rest of the board. Now to add your nose or tail block, you should be working with the underside of the board facing up, as this is the flattest reference surface. Now determine where your block has to come to hide the gaps in your rails and mark a line using a straight edge. Now you can use multiple blocks which are cut in at different angles to hide the gaps and get you a unique shape as far as the nose block goes, or you can go quite simple like we've done here by cutting a line that is perpendicular to the center line of your board. Now you'll need to cut to that line, being super careful to keep that saw nice and true so we end up with a good glue surface. I'm using a handsaw here, but a jigsaw or a circular saw would work just fine as well. Next, you'll need to clean up that cut if you need to so that your block material is referenced onto that freshly cut face nice and flat. And then we're going to glue it in place by using plenty of polyurethane glue and masking tape to hold it in place. A good tip with the masking tape is to apply additional spring clamps which pinches the masking tape together and adds a little bit of stretch to that tape, and that actually creates a fairly surprising amount of clamping pressure for a glue up like this. You will need to allow this to fully dry before repeating it if you need to do it in any other locations on your board. Lastly, you'll need to trim off any excess material from your nose or tail block and flush it up with your deck skins using a block plane or something similar. Once it's trimmed, you can then finish off by cutting the outline to match the rest of your board. By this stage, you're going to be left with a complete wooden surfboard with square rails, and shaping is going to be the next step.